Hello, and welcome to this special episode. Today I am talking with Joseph's dad, Nick. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Tell me about yourself in less than 60 seconds.
Well, I'm the baby daddy in this situation, I guess you could say. I am a college grad. I am working two jobs, and I've been working two jobs for at least 25 years. I understand the struggles of paying the bills and all those things. My mentality is kind of conservative or traditional. I think I had a pretty decent upbringing, despite that I came from a broken home. I don't think it's been really disadvantageous, not overly so.
Okay. Before you had your own family, what did you envision your children would be like?
Quite a lot different than how they turned out. I always had kind of pictured kids being disciplined, orderly, successful. I've often said that being a parent has been a humbling experience because so many of these things didn't work out the way that I thought they would, or at least not in every case.
What is the best thing about being a dad?
Seeing your kids succeed, and especially if you can see them succeed in a way that you yourself could never hope to.
What is the hardest thing about being a dad?
The hardest thing about being a dad is there's no instruction manual, and you have to figure it out yourself as you go, using whatever examples you've had in your life to model from. It's not always clear that you've done right or done well. And sometimes when you are doing it right, you're not winning any popularity contests for it.
That's true. Who has influenced you the most in terms of how you parent and what kind of parent you are?
To be quite honest, I think I learned better from bad example than from good example.
Mm-hmm.
No disrespect intended, but a lot of the things that I've seen from my own parents and from my in-laws have been influential. So I would say those parents themselves, but not necessarily in the same way as the spirit of your question would suggest.
Okay. What is your favorite quote, if you have one?
Probably the journey is the thing. Homer wrote that or said that.
I like that. What, if anything, has fundamentally changed about you due to being a dad?
I think learning to accept that everything is not going to go according to my plan.
How would you describe Joseph to somebody who doesn't know him?
In the first place, Joseph is intelligent and he's articulate. At the same time, he has impulsivity and makes bad choices, but he has a generous heart.
How would you describe your relationship with Joseph at this time?
At this time, I have come to accept that he's an adult, and wherever I cannot influence him, I have to accept that that's not something that I have to fight against any longer. The entire relationship by now has changed to the kind of relationship between two adults. It's a lot less parental at this point, and I've had to redefine it according to what he's really owed.
What do you love about Joseph?
I love that Joseph can master things when he puts his mind to it and when he has the patience to apply himself. And I love that he can get excited about things and does get excited about things and pursues them.
What is your earliest memory of Joseph's involvement in drugs?
Well, I didn't really know it at the time. So hindsight taught me that it was probably the time that he was convinced that there were wolves in the backyard, right on the other side of the fence. I remember it like this. He frequently claimed he would hear them, sometimes see them looking over the fence, that he had thrown hot burning ashes over the fence to try and fend them off or something.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody believed him, but I did. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I really wanted to exonerate him and prove him right. And so I put a camera in the woods, and I recorded it night after night, and no wolves ever came. And looking back now, I can see that was a delusion. I would have to guess this was probably a side effect of drug abuse, and I would put him at about 12 or 13 at that time, but I didn't know it then.
Right. What is your best or favorite memory with Joseph? Could be from any age.
Watching him win at judo. This was a really proud thing as a dad. He was very successful, though he was still at a young age and was still small, he attended, competed at, and won at, and I mean first prize at state competitions. So when I brought him to those, it was expected that he might bring home number one or two,
Mm-hmm.
and usually did.
Do you think Joseph did have ADHD?
I do believe so.
Mm-hmm. I know that he believes he was misdiagnosed.
Like with most psychological syndromes or dysfunctions, there's a lot of comorbidity. It doesn't just stop with the ADHD. That's a feature that's there. And I think it would be splitting hairs to try and reconstruct him as something else like an impulsive disorder person, which, I mean, that's there. But absolutely the ADHD was there from the earliest age. He would not and could not focus.
Mm-hmm. How has having a child with a drug addiction impacted your life?
Well, it's added humility. I have had to learn to keep going even though police showed up at our house, angry parents confronting me, victims of his being out there.
Who do you think has been hurt the most by Joseph's addiction? I mean, obviously Joseph himself, but as far as the people around him, who do you think has been hurt the most?
Well, there have been victims of him, like in a recent car accident. Other victims are people that he's stolen from. I
Mm-hmm.
probably don't know them all. Out of the ones that I do know, it's probably you, because I can name things that specifically that he's taken from you, damaged of yours. But I know that it's a major preoccupation of and a major source of worry and anxiety. And I think naturally so. I don't think that anybody feels it more than mothers do.
What would you say are Joseph's strengths?
His intelligence, his charisma.
Mm-hmm. What does mental health mean to you?
Suppose it would mean being able to succeed in everything that you need to succeed in, because a mentally unhealthy person will not probably succeed, will struggle with employment, education issues, relationship issues. So mental health would be a person who's not struggling, or at least not in a way that they can't manage or overcome or compensate for to get through what they need to.
Mm-hmm. What do you think causes addiction? Not necessarily just with Joseph, but in general.
Genetics. Genetics loads the gun and drugs pull the trigger.
Do you think addiction can happen to anyone? Is there anyone who's immune from that?
I think so. I think that in some people, addiction might be so benign in their case that it might be viewed as less than addiction and more likely viewed as interest, pursuit, enthusiasm, habit. Habit comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Addiction is an animal all by itself, but habit can resemble it, but not really reach to the same level of impact.
In hindsight, do you think you could have done anything differently in response to Joseph's behavior and subsequent addiction?
I don't really think so. And I think that a lot of the cards that I had been dealt that I could have used were taken from me by circumstance, by his relationship with his grandmother. Everything was tried.
What is something that makes you proud of Joseph?
His martial arts successes, his musical ability, his memory.
What is something about Joseph that you wish you could erase from your memory?
Well, I think being in the hospital that time after he was assaulted, that was a real low time. And I myself had a black eye that he gifted me the night before that. And we were both kind of a wreck that day. Matter of fact, someone thought I was the patient at one point.
I remember that. In your opinion, is it possible to prevent or stop someone from being an addict?
I think so. If they don't discover the thing they need at that level, then that's not ever going to be a part of their life. So, yeah, I think it's possible. I think there is some point in every addict's path where they reached out for the thing that they should have known better to not. And so they got a hold of that at some point and couldn't stop after that. I think there are probably lots of potential addicts that are walking around among us. Maybe I'm one. I mean, I certainly never tried any drugs, especially not anything serious. I always had a voice in my head, even as a teenager, even when I was reckless, that said, that's just a bad idea.
Do you believe that addicts can truly overcome their addiction?
I don't think so. They tell me that it doesn't work like that they always know what they're missing.
Mm-hmm. A lifelong struggle.
Yeah.
Do you think having a relationship with God or a higher power is necessary to manage the addiction successfully?
Most people would say yes. I think it is definitely an advantage for most people if they're capable of it. But I think there are probably some who are able to self manage without it if they have enough motivation, if they have enough willpower. So I wouldn't say necessary, but probably mostly necessary.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is Joseph's biggest obstacle to staying clean from drugs?
I think the biggest obstacle, or one of the biggest obstacles, is that he has a tendency to associate with the lowest common denominator. I'm talking about people who either outright use and abuse drugs or have had a history or a past with doing that, who themselves are likely to fall off the wagon. I think that the type of people that he's trying to please or impress or get the approval of are not the right group. And the thing that he hasn't tried yet that I've ever seen is to change his disposition, his outward appearance, mannerisms, take on more of what he would call a normie look or a character. Because he's in his mid 20s now, and the type of style or fashion that he's appealing to is either embraced more by, I want to use the right words here because none of them will sound positive, but mostly by thugs
Mm-hmm.
or 16-year-olds who will outgrow it.
So just not a very mature, respectable appearance.
I think that what we're doing with our appearance is attracting the attention of the kind of people that we want to be around and be like. And in that sense, he's getting it wrong. And that's going to keep him in that circuit.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the phrase, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with? Do you agree with that?
I've never heard that one before, and I'll have to take that in, but I certainly see that and understand the spirit of it. It's not coming from nowhere.
If you were going to write a book about your experience with your son's addiction, what would the title be?
Good vibes, bad habits.
I like that. When do you feel most at peace?
When I'm doing things alone and pursuing my own hobbies and interests.
If you had 3 wishes, what would they be?
For myself, a good death, one that I could be proud of. For my kids, to succeed at least as well or better than I have. And for you, personally, to find inner peace.
How do you cope with Joseph's addiction?
This is going to sound funny, but I don't really spend any time coping with it or not coping with it. I'm in an acceptance mode, and it's not something that I have to press myself toward like in coping.
Okay.
It's more like managing in case there will be family events or things like that. I will look over the prospects, what kind of things might or might not be an issue. That's not exactly the same as coping. So I guess I would say in short that I don't, but
So
I don't feel like I have to.
it sounds like you're managing with practical matters.
But I don't spend time in mental anguish over the subject.
What kinds of jobs or careers do you think Joseph would be really good at?
I think that he could have been successful in technology careers. especially ones like information security, could have been something that had been a fit, maybe still is.
Yeah, I agree with that. Joseph is 23. Where do you see him in 5 years? Where do you hope to see him in 5 years?
Well, there's a difference between where I see him in 5 years and where I hope to see him in 5 years. I would rather stick with where I hope to see him in 5 years. And where I hope to see him is actually being independent, getting himself places on his own, always providing things for himself, and being able to thank himself for what he has or blame himself for what he doesn't.
Do you have any advice for other fathers whose child is a drug addict or struggles with addiction?
Do your best to avoid anxiety and find ways to pacify yourself, because if you go down in flames with this, then that's twice as much damage. So better that you should save your peace of mind than lose it over something that you can't control.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's all I have. So thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.